Hello, nice to see you again. We're back with SIA's small bites of information. I'm very pleased to be bothering Tom again in Australia. We are going to be looking at a subject Tom covered in detail on his big picture skiing. And this is to do with pivot slipping, Tom, yeah?
That's right. Yes, pivot slipping, and then how you'd use pivot slipping in your regular skiing. So you don't want to just do exercises. You're doing exercises to make your regular skiing better. So it's all about that.
Yeah, so we were very lucky to have a guy, one of the SIA students, Steve, who very kind of most of the way through his level 3, but struggles in his bumps and with his racing. There's a video of him going down in the bumps. We've tackled Steve a little bit before. This is a rut line, obviously, or a zipper line. So we can see quite a few obvious, the usual suspects in his skiing. And if we compare it with one of the trainers going down as well, we'll be able to talk about it a bit. What are you thinking there then, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing to point out is like skiing a rut line like that, as opposed to, say, like Aspen, Colorado, beautifully spaced, round bumps, it is definitely quite challenging. Like you're sort of committing to a line straight down the hill, which is hard. And when you're doing a rut line like that, there's sort of like a minimum speed that you're going to be going at. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't do that rut line really, really slow.
No. The reason that we use rut lines sometimes is because often we don't get bumps straight away at the start of the season because they haven't formed yet. So because in the exams we have to do bumps at level 3, then we'll just make a rut line. But of course, that does trap you in. The issue you have often in a rut line is, especially if you've got long skis, you can't turn the tail that much before it catches the other side of the wall, if you like. So you are stuck with using a more advanced principle of skiing bumps, which is use the terrain. Use the bump to turn, if you like. When you're dropping off, you have to get that sensation of following the contours that way. But we are wanting to talk about pivot slipping about it, but we can see it if we look at Steve in comparison with one of the trainers now. You see the trainer coming round, and I think you were talking about extension as well being an issue.
Yes. Well, I guess the first thing I would notice as Steve in the blue comes down the bumps is most of his turning comes through not really directing where the ski tip goes, right? The ski tip is kind of almost left to its own devices and keeps traveling like in the direction. So it keeps going. Yeah, if you go from there, it keeps going away from us. Whereas if we watch the trainer come over this bump, the ski tips start being directed towards us, right? So they're pulled, I would say, in a direction. Yeah, exactly, like that red arrow. Yeah, and that's the same movement pattern you would be using in a pivot slip. See, there we go. Watch Steve. There's no attempt to actually really direct the front of the skis back across using his thighs, really. So there you go. His legs are sort of out of the screen, whereas your trainer, we keep him going. There we go. Back in towards, our view, and that's going to mean his legs are coming back under his center of mass, so keeping him balanced.
And this is definitely to do with torque as well, Tom, which I've discussed with Steve. Torque is torque is like a rotational force. So it's the idea of torque is that it's something that makes me either rotate faster or slower. Now, force has always been seen as more like force is more like a push-pull, and you can see in the trainer how he sort of pulls things together. The skis pull underneath him, and he has torque there. And this lack of torque in Steve's skiing, you can see it in his normal skiing. So we'll look, because I think you mentioned in big picture how the bumps run should look compared with a piste run. What did you say, Tom?
Yeah, I just said that you should almost look at a bump run and see if you took away the bumps, the same performance should be there. So the top of the turn should have some early edging. There should be some, alignment of being balanced against the edges, as opposed to, if you took that same short turn in the bumps and then put them on a perfectly groomed slope and made them do it. If it looked pretty rubbish, then you should be working on the short turn on the groomed first. It's got to look similar. You want to be, when you're skiing bumps well, the same performance elements are there, like sort of more carving or what's the word I'm looking for? Like a nice even blend of, like when you're twisting the legs and say it's more skidded, it's a nice blending of that. It's not a kind of a jutted, sharp kind of push Z turn shape. Should look the same.
Based upon what Tom's saying there, then we can look at Steve doing a drill from a few seasons ago. And interestingly is I've put the actual example from me as the trainer. So this is my example. And this again comes to what Tom and I discussed recently, when sometimes you have to animate and exaggerate something. So I'm exaggerating a particular thing. And the particular focus here is to be soft at the end of the turn. Don't worry about where you're leaning in and moving, twisting. The drill was to be soft and to allow the skis to be pulled underneath you here. Yeah. And when we look at Steve, we see again the leg breaking away.
Yeah, the only place is sort of really soft in is that outside ankle, so it becomes overflexed.
Yeah.
Ski bogs in and gets left behind him, whereas like there's softness in your knees, in your glutes, so they're all kind of coming down, and then when that happens, like in a pivot slip, the legs are flexed, and so you can actually use like rotational torque, bringing back the pivot slip again right there with Paul skiing. Yeah, and you see his legs get pulled across his body, which means his skis are then being able to be pulled across his body. And Steve in the blue doesn't have that ability. You see the knee stays sort of outside of his body. The ankle's what really gets overflexed. And so the only place he can create torque is kind of through the tail of the ski, through just breaking away. So
yeah. And if we look at the same video, just out of interest, the actual group that was skiing, this is one of the other students doing it. So you can see it's an achievable drill. It's something that was able for the students to do. But what Steve needed to identify was he needs to spend more time focusing on the ability to be able to do this. Because both of our issues, I think as well, Tom, was when we now look at what Steve sent us regarding his plan of pivot slipping, he very kindly then sent us his program for next season, which was cut together from these Asian skiers who are doing pivot slipping.
While you're bringing that up, I'll just give an example. Like I had a client today who's a keen skier, and he broke his tibia fibula in December, just gone.
Right.
Like really messed it up. They showed me the X-ray. It's all in bits and pieces. Now there's a metal rod in there holding it together. He's walking around, and so he's looking to rehab it. So I just gave him some tests, some movement tests to twist his body left and right. So how does he deal with torque that way? I said, where do you feel it? And the places he said he felt it are all up in his spine and in his back. So what does that tell me? Yeah. He's creating torque and movement through his spine, even though I can see his pelvis is turning left and right. And then when I tell him to go down into his legs and feel, okay, now I want you to turn your thighs and your knees and your ankles in a twisting movement, he could feel it in the left leg. The right leg, he felt nothing, felt no muscle stretching, no sensation down there, and that was the damaged leg. So my point I'm making here is if he doesn't learn to get in touch with that feeling in a warm, cozy environment, unthreatening here, there's no way he's going to get onto snow and do it. He's going to be creating torque and all sorts of strain in his back. And at the end of it, you know, after an hour of working at it, some soft tissue work, some movement, his awareness grew. He started feeling thigh muscles working. He's just like, oh my God, that's the first time I felt my calf since I broke my leg. And he walked down my stairs and was feeling much better. So he spent some time in awareness, in his body, in the right places. If you look at Steve, when you said soften your leg, flex, he thought he was doing exactly what you were saying, but he was just flexing his ankle.
Yeah.
And that just comes down to he's just not spent enough time in his body to feel these things. And someone saying, no, that's your ankle. That's not your knee and your hip bending. That's just your ankle. Your hip and your knee has barely changed.
Yeah.
So that was my message.
Exactly. That is that this torque that comes from Archimedes and these levers and everything. When we're talking about torque, you can find more about that in detail on bigpictureskiing.com. I'll let you look at that, everybody, rather than us walk to you through torque.
People can go there and find, you know,
exactly
hours of stuff on it, and so you can really delve deep and get a good understanding. And I teach you how to see these things and then how to correct these things. But let's go back to Steve's video.
So look, here's the pivot slip sent to us from Steve. So this was the first one. And Steve's idea is to practice pivot slipping, which again on bigpictureskiing.com you can find 2 hours of discussion in pivot slipping. So that would be a good place to start, especially to do with the ability to have the right mechanics with the edging part. Because I see pivot slipping, funny enough for me, Tom, why I use pivot slipping still is when I get a new pair of skis or boots, I find it's great for finding the center and tuning into that ski's sweet spot. That's why I use it, strangely enough. But of course, one of the main reasons you do is you want to use it because you see the importance in somebody's ability to understand releasing edges and being able to feel what you can do, whether you're edging a ski or you're actually flat on your skis. And
flat.
The importance between these two, pivoting.
Yeah, because I mean, so you can pivot slip the way the girls do in the brown trousers by using more an extension and forward movement, which is of course going to make the tails not touch the snow. So they're very easy to pivot and come around. But the guy, PSIA demo on that right hand side, he doesn't use any extension or barely any. You'll see just through there, he's using the ability to flatten the skis, which I talk about in the videos, and then use the legs and everything to make the pivot slip happen. So that extension movement is not, I guess, what I see an essential movement unless there is cruddy snow.
Yeah,
that's the only time you'd really need it. But if there's nothing like that there, you shouldn't need it. And as you go faster in the bumps, it's actually going to be a detriment because you're going to be losing contact with the snow.
And that's why I wanted to show that, because my argument was that in this video that Steve shows, she's making a very deliberate extension, a bit like how Steve skied his bumps with a deliberate extension. And when she then moves into the bumps field, she differs, she changes. Now the extension disappears.
Yeah, there's the same as the PSIA sort of demo, where there's just finding the flat ski and then learning how to use the thighs to create torque to move the front of the ski around.
And it's noticeable with a pivot slip. What's good about it is how it does help you keep the skis underneath you, which is Steve's problem, is skis get away from them, don't they, a lot?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's where it'd be really beneficial for him.
So
only if it's taught right that way, because people can go out and can definitely do it a multitude of ways. I've seen lots of people do some pretty weird pivot slips.
Yeah, at the end, the other problem we mentioned with this, and Steve's right, by the way, just to conclude that part, is pivot slipping will help somebody with corridor and the ability to speed control. But at some point, we notice that, in this case, He's got a lovely set of lines that have been developed to practice pivot slipping on the bumps.
Yeah,
So that's
mogul
up
tank
to
there.
SIA making sure that we design a proper course for people who are struggling, a proper line for people who are struggling, so they have that ability to practice that on flat terrain with a wave.
Yeah, I remember one time, the only one time two times, Perisher in Australia, I got to take my group of, I think they were level 3 APSI, budding APSI people. We got to use a mogul tank to practice. Invaluable, so good. And then another time when I used to work at Silver Star in Canada, there was a really competitive mogul team there, and they built a roller tank, which we got to use. But it was before I really understood how good it is. So the fact that if you can get that in Austria next year, I'm jealous, because that's I think every ski resort should have that. I mean, it's awesome for kids.
Well, we have one, but it's really widespread. So it's more like, about 30 meters between each peak. So we do have a rollover, which is cool for the kids, exactly, to understand the virtual bump, and needs to be much closer. Interestingly,
really transfer to moguls. So if you can get that, and there's people are going to progress much faster.
So we might as well watch the end of this, Steve, as well, so Steve can see that this guy goes from, again, relatively soft, easy line, pivoting until at the end. We see the guy now. How much pivot slipping now is involved in this, Tom?
It's quite a big difference. That's using more absorption extension. There's definitely a little bit of pivot and slip in there to help, direct the skis from facing across the hill to back under and back and forth. But there's a big jump from what he was just doing before to now, like competitive World Cup style direct line. Yeah, absorption extension. If you don't have those movements, which is a whole other subject, which I delve into, if you're interested on the site. But yeah, that takes a whole other sort of set of mechanics that people need to learn on top of the pivot slipping to really get to that level.
So I think in conclusion with this is Steve is right. It needs a disciplined coaching team who can design specific drill sets and terrain that allows somebody to come out of their comfort zone only by a few centimeters. But equally, Steve, I hope that you've learned as well from Tom's side that he instantly falls into what I agree with, is as we get older, it's even more and more important we are aware of our body mechanics off the skis, that we get some ability to know where are we moving, where are we creating this torque from, because that will be invaluable on the hill. Yeah,
it's going to help us as coaches, because then we're not saying, flex all the joints, and the only joint the person flexes is the ankle. And, you have to then spend hours teaching them about, trying to feel their hips and knees. If you spend some time in the gym and everything, you shortcut all that waste that you can just get to it on the snow.
Yeah. And there's definitely a line of progression here from very simple basic to middle to high end. And the technique of absorption extension with pivot slipping will change. You'll adapt as you have more speed, but more speed doesn't mean less control. Quite the opposite. That's also the point. And if we tend to search, pivot slipping has, like every medicine we take, will have a side effect. And the side effect of searching for too much control can almost always stall a person from just getting used to getting in there and getting some rhythm and flow. Because they're looking for that skidding or drifting action in between that sometimes is just not possible. We sometimes, as you know, have to make a double bump, very quick turns, and it's that can help as well. So more information, bigpictureskiing.com, where you can take this very short video, and actually I'd say on Big Picture Skiing, you can find over 12 hours of information regarding this, bumps, pivot slipping at different levels. Is that not true, yeah?
Yeah, correct. I'm just trying to add to it, every other week, adding more info and people. It's definitely more targeted to the really keen skier and the instructor. So that's the kind of level and an area I'm sort of targeted, because that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. And I think from my side, Tom, I have to say that from my side, why I find it an invaluable tool is that at last somebody is nodding their head, going along with, hang on, do we need to know a bit about mechanics as well? Yes, it's good to know about angular velocity. It's good to know about insertions, origins, and muscles. To a degree, it helps you have the coach's eye, and that's why I love bigpictureskiing.com, because it really allows us to absorb into those mechanics. And if you are a coach or an instructor out there,
in a simple way, hopefully that gets. I really try and take. I've spent how many bloody thousands of hours analysing anatomy and stuff and putting my hands on it, but the benefit of that is I can pass that on to hopefully simple things of like, move your thigh from here to here because it creates more torque, more power. You can ski the moguls quicker.
Absolutely.
Done.
Yeah.
But,
good stuff.
Teaching you to be able to see that stuff. If you've never known to look for that, how to see it, you can just see, oh, look, I look out of balance, I'm skidding. Well, why? Why does all that happen? I'm trying to help people to be able to see that more simply. So
yeah, good stuff.
Glad you're enjoying that approach.
Absolute, me, I love it. I love that part of it. Great. So we will see you again in the future. You can visit Tom anytime you want, but for me, I'm probably off on holiday and I might do some strength conditioning stuff with you, but we hope to see you in the future, Tom, and SIA. We'll be skiing around.
I heard you're up on Kitzsteinhorn tomorrow building that
bump line
for Steve, aren't you?
Of course.
So he can come next week, and he'll be able to just.
Exactly. And he should bring himself some bump skis and some bumps, some ski boots, like appropriately, because that makes a huge difference as well. No doubt about it. Okay, bye for now. Anyway, from SIA and.